Hello, welcome to our webinar today on the Arts Council's Art Project Grants for fiscal year 2024, which for us runs from July 1st, 2023 through June 30th of 2024. I am Carolyn Koska. I'm the Grants Administrator here at the Arts Council. And first I'll just run through what we're going to talk about today. We'll talk briefly about Southwest Minnesota Arts Council. We'll look at the guidelines for this grant program. We'll take a look at what resources are available for you on our website. Then we'll go into our grant system and walk through the application for this art project grant. And we'll finish up talking about the grant process, or what happens after you submit an application. Everyone is muted for now. We'll stop a couple times for questions when you can unmute yourself and talk. Otherwise, feel free to type any questions in the chat in the meantime. And then at the end, we will also have some time to talk more about your specific projects if you'd like. So the Southwest Minnesota Arts Council, or SMOC, is a nonprofit organization committed to promoting and encouraging the development of the arts in the 18 counties of Southwest Minnesota by serving as a source of funds and technical services which enable local organizations, educational institutions, and individuals to sponsor, create, and promote the arts in their communities. Here is our region down in the southwest corner of the state. We are one of 11 regional arts councils that cover the whole state of Minnesota. And our funding comes mostly from the state of Minnesota. We have an allocation from their general fund, but also the majority of our state funding comes from the Arts and Cultural Heritage or Legacy Fund. We also receive some funding from the McKnight Foundation, which we use for our grants for artists, and also from memberships and donations from around our region. To be a little more specific about our service area, applicant organizations to this program do need to be located here. And this region includes 18 counties, which are Big Stone, Chippewa, Cottonwood, Jackson, Candy, Ojai, Lackawarra, Lincoln, Lyon, McLeod, Meeker, Murray, Nobles, Pipestone, Redwood, Renville, Rock, Swift, and Yellow Medicine, and also 2 tribal nations, the Jutazizi Upper Sioux Community and Chanshayapi Lower Sioux Community. We acknowledge that this region occupies the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of the Dakota people. Types of organizations that can apply for our art project grants are nonprofit organizations that have their 501c3 status, units of government like city, county, or tribal government, and public schools or community ed that has a community project, as opposed to a project in the school. If your organization basically operates as a nonprofit, but you don't have your 501c3 status yet, you can still apply. You'll just need to use a fiscal sponsor. And this would be an organization who does meet one of those organization types that we had on the previous slide. And then they would receive your funds for you and be ultimately responsible for the carrying out of the project. So if you choose to do this in your application, you'll need to include an agreement with that fiscal sponsor organization, just spelling out your relationship and how that is all going to work between your 2 organizations. And then a representative from the fiscal sponsor organization will need to sign your application as well. So the kinds of activities that you can do through this grant include all kinds of performances, music, dance, theater, and these can all be either put on by community groups or be professional artists brought into the community. It could also include things like visual art exhibits, readings by authors, art classes for community members of any age, smaller public art projects, and art festivals. This grant is available for up to $7,000, and in the current year, no matching funds are required. This means that as long as your project is within that maximum amount that you can request, your organization will not need to put any funds toward the project. Some things that are not eligible for this program: projects that don't have an art focus, activities of a for-profit project, organization, or business, educational projects within a school system, activities that take place outside of Minnesota. Since we are using state funds, there is that limitation that all activities need to take place within the state. Also not eligible are activities that are not open to the public, religious socialization of the participants or audience, fundraising events. In other words, these grants are meant to help your project break even, not to make a profit. Also ineligible are payments of debts incurred before your grant begins, grant funds being used to match another SMOC grant that you have from us. If you are already receiving operating support from us, you cannot include any prorated operating type costs in this art project budget. So for instance, you couldn't include a portion of your office rent in your art project budget. And also ineligible are applicants who have outstanding past due final reports with us. One new thing that we have added this year is a funding limit per organization per year. So organizations will now be limited to $20,000 a year in SMOC grant funds. We're hoping to be able to spread our funding among more organizations. The limit of the $20,000 does exclude operating support. So if you are receiving operating support from us, that does not count toward that total. There are 3 application rounds for this program. The first one is coming up on July 26th for projects starting September 1st or later. Round 2 has a deadline of November 8th for projects starting January 1st or later. This is a change for us this year. If you're used to when our project rounds usually are in the past, this round 2 has usually been in December. So if you're generally a round 2 applicant, be aware that the deadline has moved about a month earlier. This does allow you to then start your project January 1st, which you weren't able to do before. And then round 3 deadline is March 13th for projects starting May 1st or later. And for all of these deadlines, you'll need to submit your application through our system by 4:30 p.m. The system will not allow you to submit after that time. And we strongly suggest that you aim for submitting your application before the deadline date, just in case you run into some computer glitches or something, just to make sure that you're able to get that application in. For your project, you'll need to choose a start date. And in thinking about that, you'll want to check for that earliest allowed start date that we just looked at, each of those tied to each of the deadlines. So you can't start any of your project activities before that start date, which would include things like ordering supplies, doing any advertising, or holding auditions. None of that can happen before that start date. And you can't expend any funds before that start date. If there would be a situation where there's something that you absolutely need to pay for before your start date, for instance, an artist you're bringing in needs a down payment on their contract to commit to your date, that amount would not be able to be included in your project budget for the grant. So that would have to happen totally separately from the grant if things did not time out in that way. So thinking about how these start dates work, remember that your start date should not be the first day of your event, your theater production, your festival, etc. You need to give yourself time before that date in order to accomplish things preparing for your project. You'll also need an end date. And when you're choosing that, make sure you give yourself plenty of time to complete the project, do your evaluation. You always can complete a project early if you need to, but just make sure you give yourself plenty of time. And anything awarded this year needs to be finished up by June 30th of 2025. There are a couple of people that are going to need to be tied to your application. You'll need a project director, and this will be whoever is most directly responsible for the project, probably the person that's really managing the day-to-day of what's going on with that. And then you'll need an authorizing official, which would be someone with authorizing power for your organization, like your president or your treasurer. And these do need to be two separate people. They cannot be the same person. So both of those people in those roles will need to sign all of your grant documents, including your application. And I will pause here for a moment to see if there are any questions. All right, I have not heard any questions, so we will keep moving on, and we're going to head over to our website. So we actually have just gotten a new website within the last month here, so I want to give you a little tour of where to find everything you need here on the new website. We've organized things a little differently, and we're hoping that it will be a little more intuitive for people to find. So you're going to want to go to this grants tab, and you'll see that very first thing is a link to the login to our grant system. And then you can choose the type of grant that you're looking at. We'll click on our organizations and go to our art project grants. And on this page, you'll find guidelines. So when we talked about some of those eligibility things earlier, that was an overview, and all of the details are here in these guidelines. So it's very important to take a look at those. You can also click here to log into the grant system. We've got all of our important dates. You come back later, there'll be the video for this workshop available here for you. And then we have just some of our materials linked here as well, such as the application questions in a Word document in case you'd like to work on your draft in there and then paste into the system later. I'm just going to point out a couple other things. Under Grants Help, we have our workshops and assistance page. And this is just a reminder of all of the ways you can get help with your application. We have grant support open office hours. These are the second Tuesday of the month. If you come into our office in Marshall, we'll be available from 10 to 2. And you can talk through any project ideas you might have, or even bring things with you and work on your application right there in the office with us handy to answer your questions, or maybe if you need some help preparing your work samples, things like that. So that's available for you. We also have some grant Q&A sessions, some in person coming up. So look ahead to see if we are coming to your area and meet in person. and also some virtual Q&A sessions planned through the rest of the year. You can schedule some time with me by following this link. You can grab a time on my calendar and we can talk by phone, by Zoom, or in person in the office in Marshall. And then here we've got some registration links for the other workshops we have coming up. And here with our past grant workshops will be another place where those completed workshop videos will be posted. Also under grants help, we have our credits and resources. So you've got links to information about credit lines and logos you may need to be using, along with some sample documents that may be helpful with your application. So from here, we are going to move over into our grant system. And if you already have an account in the system, you would just log in. But if you are new, you can create an account here. If you're not sure whether you or someone from your organization already has an account in the system, just contact us and we can let you know and get something figured out that makes the most sense for you and your organization. So we're gonna log in here. And as you come in, you'll come to your dashboard. If you also occasionally act as a grant review panelist for us, make sure to change your role to applicant so that you're at your applicant dashboard. So you will, if you're returning to the grant system, come to this dashboard. If you are coming in for the first time, you'll go right to this apply page. And this lists all of the applications that we currently have open. So you can scroll through and find the one that you're looking for. Our art projects is right here at the top. If you want, you can preview the application without actually starting anything. Or if you're ready to apply, you can click the apply button. So we've started our application, and I'm just going to point out a couple of buttons before we get started. Over here, there is Google Translate embedded in the website. So if you'd like to be working in another language, you can choose here, and that will translate the interface and all of the questions for you, so you are able to work in that other language. We have the Copy Previous Answers button. If you have done an application in the system before, you can click this and choose a previous application to copy from into this new application, and any questions that are the same between the two, it will copy those answers over for you. Then there's also the Collaborate button. If you would like somebody to be able to work on the application with you, you can put their email address in here, choose what level of permission you'd like to give them, and send them a message saying what it is that you'd like them to do, whether you want them to read a draft, sign, attach some work samples, fill out some audience numbers, things like that. And then you can invite them here. They'll receive an email, and they'll just need to create a password if they don't already have an account in the system. All right, so the application starts out with a project name, just describing what it is you're going to do. Here are some examples. You do not need to put the name of your organization again into the project name, just the actual project that you're going to be doing. Here's where you can put the amount you're requesting. You may want to wait to do that until after you have filled out the budget form. Then we've got some links to a couple of those resource documents here. Again, I'll also point out under our tips here, You'll see there's a quite large character limit for a lot of the fields. We want to make sure you have plenty of room, but we're really not expecting you to use that all up. So if you feel like you've answered the question, no need to try and add anything else to use up more of those characters. So here you'll start with describing your project. It does tell you you'll be asked questions about artists, planning, publicity, budget, impact a little later on. So this would just be the details of what exactly it is you are planning to do. Here's where you'll enter in your start and end date, and it gives you some reminders of guidelines around those. We also ask you to include information about the public events related to your project so that we can put them on our area arts calendar. So you can put all those details here. We do need kind of all of this specific information in order to enter those on the calendar. So please be sure to include all of that. And also a reminder that your activities do not have to be funded by a SMOC grant in order to be included on our area arts calendar. We'd really like to get as many activities on there as we can. So feel free to email us with information about your other events. Then we have section is on artistic quality and merit. So we're asking you to talk about the artistic vision behind your project. What artists have you chosen and why have you chosen either those particular artists, or if you are a community theater, for instance, why did you choose a particular production? Then you're asked to provide some resumes or bios for all of your artists. If things have timed out such that you don't yet have an artist hired, some options that you have there would be to include a job description for what you want them to do and what kinds of qualifications you're hoping to hire for. Or if this has been a recurring project for you, you can put information about artists that filled these roles last year and talk about how you're trying to find artists of a similar quality. So here's where you will enter any work samples that you are providing. We have several upload fields along with some space to describe what you're attaching. And then below we also have a bunch of fields for links. Again, describing what it is that you are attaching in those links. Then we go on to talking about the underserved and underrepresented. This question has multiple parts and it has been very easy for people to miss one. So make sure that you are addressing all three parts of this question in your answer. First, we're asking you to think about your community and describe groups that may be underserved or underrepresented. You might want to consider race or ethnicity, language, socioeconomic level, gender, ability, etc. And if you feel like you need to find out more about the demographics of your community in order to answer this question, we've got a link here to Minnesota Compass, which has done a lot of work on putting together some statistics. I'll just grab a town as an example here. They've got information about population in general, age, race or ethnicity. I'll point out that some of these that say suppressed is just because it's a very small number or because there's a big margin of error in that. But you'll see that, for instance, these do make up a considerable percentage together, since white population here is only 85%. So it's got things about disability, housing, transportation, all kinds of things that you can look up for your community to help you come up with those groups that might be underserved or underrepresented. So once you've thought about that and you've come up with some of these groups that fit that criteria, then you need to think about what are some specific things you could do to reach out to or involve at least one of those groups so that they can participate in your project. And we a lot of times see the answer, our activities are open to everyone. That does not really answer this question. We need you to think about something specific that you can do. Some examples here are actually including members of that group in your planning to find out their interests, their needs. That's a big one. Things like providing transportation or childcare, and then sort of reaching out to get to know individuals from that group, and then directly welcoming them into your activities. Those are some things to think about, examples of what you could do. And we do realize that your organization may already consist of this underserved or underrepresented group. And if so, we ask for a little more information about that. And then thirdly, we want you to think about how you're going to ensure that the project will be accessible to those with all kinds of disabilities, not just mobility, which I think is the one that people first think about, but to think a little more broadly about that. And if you do, as an organization, have an ADA access plan, how does that inform your planning for this project? Then we look at the impact of this project. You'll talk about why is this important? Is it meeting particular needs? Is it kind of growing out of your organization's mission and previous programming? And then most importantly, what impact do you expect this will have? And we want you to think about changes that are taking place, not just we had 100 people in the audience. That's not necessarily the impact. What changes are happening for those audience members, for those participants or artists, thinking about changes to artistic skills, knowledge, attitude, behaviors, etc. And then you'll need to have a way to measure or prove that those changes have taken place. If in your project you want audience members to have a change in attitude toward a specific artistic genre, for instance, how will you know if their attitude has changed? And you've got some space if you're using some kind of evaluation tool like a survey or interview questions, things like that. You can attach that here, and then just some audience numbers. Then we're just looking a little more at some of your planning for the project. Is there anyone else besides the artist that you already talked about who has a key role? It's also likely that maybe there isn't, and that's okay to just put, no, we don't have anyone else that has a large role in the project, but this could also be perhaps you're paying your project director and want to provide a little more information about that. Then we're just asking a few questions about your planning schedule, publicity, what kind of support are you getting from the community? Are there any collaborations, donations, things like that? And we look at budget, and there is a budget form here that you can use, or if you'd like to, you can create your own. But I think this one, if you're at all able to use this Excel form, is more helpful. So here's your form. You can put up here your project name or your organization name, and then you can start entering in various expense items. We'll get some numbers in here. And then you've got space to put your income for the project. You have some ticket sales or donations. Oops, I'm going to stick that over here. And you'll see that these are totaling for you as you're adding your amounts in there. And then down here, this will help you figure out how much you can request. It will calculate this here. It'll take your cash cost minus your other funding. So right now it tells us your request cannot exceed $5,500 or the maximum request amount for this grant program, whichever is less. So maximum for our projects is $7,000. 5,500 is less, so that's how much we can request. Let's say though we have a little more expensive project. Let's say it is $9,000. So now this tells us our request cannot exceed $8,500 or our project 7,000, whichever is less. So now our 7,000 is the max we can request. However, our profit equals minus $1,500. That means that we need some more income for our project. So maybe we have to find a donation of $1,500. So now you'll see your profit equals 0. So that's what you're aiming for. So you would fill this out and upload into the application here. We have the budget narrative field, so you can add any more details if you wanted to explain how you came up with your estimated ticket sales that you put in there, or if you want to break down how much you're paying some individual artists, things like that. Then we have you put in just some basic information about your organization, your mission statement, brief history, types of programs, etc. Some information about your board. This is another one to make sure you're covering all the question parts here. So we have these few questions about kind of how your board operates, but also we're asking for a list of names and qualifications of your board members, which you can answer both parts here in this text box, or you can put a board member list here. Then we're doing just some data collection. This section doesn't really have much bearing on your application, just some information you need to collect. So it asks about your most recently completed fiscal year. If you are an arts organization, you'll enter your total expenses for that completed year. If you are a non-arts organization, you would enter your annual expenses specifically for the arts during that year. And then some demographic information, yearly audience served for that year that we were talking about up here. And then we're also just asking for some feedback on what kinds of art assistance you have used in preparation for this application. Then contact information, legal name of your organization, and then if there's another name by which your organization is known, and if you'd like that used in publicity instead of your legal name. Information about your project director, your authorizing official, who is the grant writer in case we have some questions. You can mark whether that is the project director or authorizing official as above here, or the owner of this account if that's somebody different, or if you choose this, you can enter contact information. Then if you are using a fiscal sponsor for this project, if you click yes there, then you'll have fields in which to enter their information, including that fiscal sponsor agreement. And there's a sample agreement here if you need some guidance for what that might include. And finally, we have our signatures at the end here. And that blue collaborate button at the top is really handy if you need to, for instance, invite your fiscal sponsor to come in here and sign. So we will click Save Application since we are not ready to submit. You'll see that Submit button there. And this will tell you what questions you still have left, what of the required questions you still have left to answer. We haven't done anything, so those are all here. But you don't need to be hitting that save button all of the time. It will be auto saving as you are. So you could click continue to keep working, but we're going to head back to our dashboard. And you'll see now here's this application that we just started. And if you want to get back in and keep working, there's the edit application link here. And then later, as you can come back here if you're awarded a grant, and you'll see your contract is available and your final report. So we are just going to head back over to our slides for a second, and we will stop again for a minute if there are any questions.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Our organization is very interested in this grant opportunity. We are not traditionally an arts organization. We're a nonprofit that helps seniors and people living with disability to lead meaningful lives by providing direct services and meaningful arts programming.
Okay.
And we did receive a SMOC grant a number of years ago to bring to do writing workshops with our seniors.
Mm-hmm.
And that led up to a relationship with an organization called Compass, and they bring arts programming to schools and to places like senior citizen housing places, which is what we're interested in.
Right.
On the heels of a project we did last winter, we had these two wonderful artists that came out and did a writing workshop. It's an intergenerational program asking participants what they would like the younger and or the older generation to know about themselves. The artists did a workshop with our seniors in a senior center, and then at the high school with high school students. And we're standing around with the various people that collaborated and said, wouldn't it be wonderful to bring these people back and bring them to a nursing home setting and use the people that participated as volunteers to help facilitate this with immobile people, and also bring the younger people into the nursing home setting to get them experiencing. So that's kind of the project that we're going to be proposing. The question is that as we were doing that, we identified a specific time frame when it would be nice to have this happen, which is the second week in September.
Okay.
And as I'm reading through the criteria, you know, it correctly says you should not have your start date the day of the event. You should give yourself a month for promotion, and activities, you know, that you would do could be covered by the grant. My question is, would we be better off not to stick with that time frame, or can we go ahead and propose the possibility of starting this second week in September and with alternative dates throughout the year to be considered?
Yeah, I think that it would be cutting it really close to be having to wait to start anything until September 1st.
Right.
I know there's probably not a lot of advertising necessarily that you're doing because they're just coming to the nursing home. I think probably in getting the students involved, you probably have to start before September 1st. There definitely would be a concern. We haven't quite talked about scoring criteria yet, but one of the things they're looking at is your ability to accomplish the project. And if, you know, they see that really tight timeline, they may think, I don't know how likely it is that everything is going to come
Right.
together in that short amount of time. The other thing of slight concern is how does the involvement with the students work in our project grants? We're not allowed to do educational things in the schools. So,
So this is
can you
not
tell me a
part
little
of,
more how that
yes.
works?
Thank you. Thank you. This is, you're helping answer the questions. This is not a part of the curriculum. We kind of hold the workshops outside of the school curriculum in the school, mainly to get the student involvement. The artist goes back and forth, bringing the same questions to both the senior group and the student group.
Mm-hmm.
For the first part of it. And then in the second part of this proposal, the students would come up into the nursing home.
Yeah, I think if it was a really optional activity for the students that's not tied in any way to their grades.
Yes, that is the case, actually.
Mm-hmm.
It is completely optional. It's an extra, it's an after school event.
Yeah, I think if you're able to be really clear that this is not a school project that the students are doing, that should be okay.
Perfect. Thank you. That you answered two of my concerns.
All right. Well, I'm going to continue on with the rest of the info I was going to cover today, and then we can sure continue talking once we have gotten through that. So here are just some tips as you are getting started on your application. Really think ahead to choose the best round for your project that times out right. You may need to apply a little earlier than you are initially thinking, just to make sure that you have enough time to do all of your preparations. So make sure to read the guidelines and the criteria carefully. We are always so sad when we discover someone has submitted something and then not read the guidelines and something is ineligible. We really want to keep you from doing any extra work. So please make sure to read that before you get started. Also start working on your application early. We talked earlier about aiming for a day before the deadline to try and get your application submitted, just in case you run into any issues. So the earlier you can start on that, the better. And then as we look through the application, you saw that a lot of the questions had multiple parts to them. So make sure you are getting all those and getting the questions fully answered. While you're doing that, it's also good to keep your answers just real clear and concise. No fancy grant language needed, just everyday language is great. Also good to assume that the reviewers don't know anything about your organization or your project. Just really write as if you're telling someone about this who's just never heard of anything that you do. And finally, a last tip is don't hesitate to contact us if you have any questions or things that you are unsure about. There are multiple ways to get assistance with your application. We can talk with you about your project before you're even getting started, just to make sure you're in the right grant program, everything is eligible. You also can ask us questions about things you run into that on the application that you're not sure about. We also are able to review your application draft before you submit it. If you can let us know 2 weeks before the deadline that you have a draft ready, we can go in there and take a look and see if you're missing anything or something we think might sound a little confusing that needs to be cleared up a little bit, things like that. That can be really valuable to take advantage of that. Another reason to start working on your application early. So after you've submitted an application, the first thing that happens is SMAC staff will review it for eligibility and completeness. Make sure you have everything you're supposed to. If we find that there's something missing or there is a question about something with eligibility, you'll have 48 hours to fix whatever that is. And then at that point, that is SMOC staff contact with your request. We don't have any say over what gets funded or not. That gets passed on to our panel of individuals from around the region. So the round of applications will go to that panel. They will read and score the applications and discuss them based on the criteria for the program, which we'll look at in a second. And then their final scores will go to our board of directors, who make the final decisions based on those recommendations. So the criteria for this grant program include the artistic quality and merit of the project. That's worth 50% of your score. The impact on the participants and audience, worth 22% of your score. Then what you are doing to reach the underserved and underrepresented, 14% of your score, and your ability to accomplish the project, also 14% of your score. And if you look at the criteria document that we have posted, it goes into much more detail of all of these criteria of what exactly the panel will be looking for. Then after the panel has done their scoring, your application may be able to have a few additional priority points. If you are a first-time applicant to us, if your organization is led by or primarily serving BIPOC, LGBTQ communities or people with disabilities, or if you're from a county that has received fewer grants from us recently. So you have a chance to have up to 3 additional percentage points added to your score. So if your grant is awarded, you will need to sign a contract with us. Then you'll receive payment of that full award after we've gotten that contract. You'll need to acknowledge the grant on all of the advertising that you are doing. There'll be a credit line in your grant contract that you need to use. And depending on the source of funds you're awarded, you may also need to use this Minnesota Legacy logo. And all of that information will be sent to you. And we also looked at that spot on the website where you can find that. If as your project is going on, you discover things aren't going quite as planned and you might need to make some changes, please contact us and we may be able to do something like extend your project end date or approve some changes to your budget. So no worries if things don't go as planned, just reach out to us and we'll see what we can do to make things work. Then there will be a final report due 60 days after your project end date. And it's always a good idea to take a look at the final report just as you are getting your project started, just to make sure you know what kinds of information you'll need to be gathering. All right, that was the information I was hoping to get through with you all today. So now I can open things back up again if there are any more questions.
I do, Carolyn. I do have a question about the artistic merit.
Sure, go ahead.
We're trying to get this project together and we've been working on it for about 6 months. I know we really can't do anything, but we're trying to put the pieces together so we can actually figure out a budget and if we can attain that goal.
Okay.
So in deciding on the artistic merit of the project, what specific standards do you use?
I'm gonna head back to our website for a second. And I'll bring up that sheet that has the details about the criteria on there. So here's what we're looking for. The activities have high artistic merit, potential for participants and audience to develop knowledge, skills, and understanding of the arts. And then the artist resumes or bios show an appropriate level of experience for the project. And their work samples provide evidence of high artistic quality, including technical skill and their own artistic vision or voice. Is that helpful?
You know, so if it's a project your community has never done before, and I mean, is there a real need, you know, when you say appropriate level of experience? So you're expecting the artist to have done a project similar to this before?
Or transferable skills.
And what do you define as an artist?
Can you tell me a little more about what you're?
Well, we're working on this. We want to do a local A to Z book.
Okay.
That we want to partner with a local artist to interpret, to sort of define, to give a different look at the community on a historical and a not just historical, but a community basis of what we value in the community. And we're talking about, you know, we've talked to people and trying to work so we can do a children/old adult book that would be something people could enjoy, and do a Spanish version. We think that in order to do it, to be able to afford to do it, we need somebody with, definitely we want people with talent, but to do it. And we have somebody that we've talked to, but she's not a classically trained artist.
Okay, yeah, and we're not necessarily looking at, you know, what degrees do they have. I think in that case, samples of their work would be more important.
Okay.
So do they have plenty of other work that they've done?
Well, we've seen work that they've done.
Okay.
And we did, our organization, we did apply for the legacy funding for a project we didn't get funded for, and so we did it locally, and we accomplished that. And we really think that she was the least trained of the artists that we had do it, and we believe that her work is by far the most exceptional work of the project we did.
Yeah. And I think the examples of work that they can show is much more important than their training, certainly. Okay. You know, if you can talk about, this is why this artist meets our artistic vision for this book, this is why we feel they are the best person to do this.
So then my second question is, so we work on the grant, and we've been working on the project, trying to understand what the actual cost of doing the project is. And so, you know, we've talked to the local Spanish teacher, and she would do that. Would she work and help us with the translation of the book and all those sort of things? And, you know, trying to get that together. And then we talk about the actual physical development of the book. And, you know, like I said, we've worked on it for 6 months, and we've got a quote 3 months ago, and now we just got another quote just to update what we're talking about. And that, you know, we're continuing to see 10 or 15% increases in what the cost of the project can be, just because. So it's going to be very hard to guarantee what our budget is going to be.
Yeah, I think you'll just need to do, you know, at the time of applying, this is the information that you have. So this is what we say our budget is going to be now.
Would it be better for us to talk about the production of and not to apply for the development of the product rather than the actual publication of the product?
Yeah,
You
I
know,
think I think it would go better if the focus is really on the development and kind of getting everything together up to printing. Rather than having like the bulk of the grant being just the actual printing of the books.
books.
Okay. And
So-
just to clarify, what is the plan once the books are printed?
I think the organization would like to cover the cost, you know, maybe be able to give X number of books to the school.
Right, yeah.
And then try to sell the rest of the books to sort of support the project and get the book out in the public.
Yeah, so you would then want to factor in the sales of the books as income for the project in your budget.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think
so then you could certainly decide to just include your costs up to the point of having the book ready to print. But if you decide to include costs of printing, then you would need to include in your income estimated costs, estimated income.
Of
for
what the
those
sales part
sales.
would be.
Yeah. So just to make sure this isn't a fundraising kind of thing,
Right.
which sounds like is not your intent. So.
Well.
All right. Well, I think I will let everybody go here. Thank you, both of you, for joining us today. Just let me know if you have some more questions you run into, and we can talk about those.
Okay, we certainly will. I appreciate your time.
Yep. Good luck with projects.